Good. All right, so thank you guys for coming out. My name is Ludwiczak. I hope you find this presentation interesting or at least entertaining. So my thesis is titled An Analysis of Sportsbook Behavior and How to Profit. And I want to start out just by explaining a little bit about how sports betting works and how it works whenever you want to bet on sports. So whenever you bet on sports, you have to wager 10% more than what you're going to win or what you're going to collect if you win. And that extra 10% is called juice, and that's basically what provides for a house advantage, just like any other casino game. So if we look at an example, I just use the Super Bowl teams here. The long-standing tradition of sportsbook models is that they want to collect an equal amount of betting dollars on each side. And if they're able to do that, they're going to make a risk-free rate. So if they're able to collect $110 on each team, so Seattle and Denver in the Super Bowl, for example, it doesn't matter which team wins, they're going to be paying out the $110 wagered, in this case on Seattle. They're also going to be paying out the $100 to Seattle bettors. So they're collecting a total of $220, they're paying out $210, and they're making a risk-free rate of 4.54%. But that model was not very good, and a guy by the name of Stephen Levitt, who's the author of Freakonomics, believed that instead of accepting equal action, sportsbooks actually try to accept unbalanced action and use their superior knowledge against the average bettor in order to increase their profits. And so what he did in 2004 is he was able to gain access to betting tournament data, and he was able to look at the relationship between the point spread and the bet percentage, which is just the amount of action that is bet on each team. And what he found was pretty groundbreaking. So the two graphs you see here are when the home team is the favorite and when the away team is the favorite. And in both cases, they're both skewed to the right. So the favorites are overbet, and that's a lot of biased betting. So for example, Dallas Cowboys fans always think they're going to win the Super Bowl even though they've gone 8-8 the past 3 seasons. That's an example of overbetting. There were a lot of limitations to Levitt's findings though, and so a pair of researchers 3 years later were able to do a follow-up study with a better set of data. And essentially they found the exact same conclusions. They confirmed all of Levitt's initial findings. They even went one step further to find a regression model. And so we're able to look at this regression model, and this represents the standard amount of action that a sportsbook is going to accept on the favorite, whether they're at home or on the road. All right, so basically we know from Levitt's results that sportsbooks do accept unbalanced wagering. It seems that you can't really argue that. And from the regression model on the previous slide, we can know how much unbalanced that wagering typically is. And so we can look at this as a market where efficiency is implied by that regression model. And so what I did for my thesis is I wanted to look for deliberate deviations from that regression model or from efficiency. Because if there are deliberate deviations, it's very likely caused by the sportsbook because they have a lot of power over how much action comes in on each team because they set the point spread and they can move it freely throughout the week. So if there is a deviation from efficiency, it's likely that they know something that the average bettor either doesn't know or isn't considering or is underestimating. And there were 2 situations that I found that I think provided great value and tipped us off as to the casino accepting unbalanced wagering because they knew they had an advantage. And the first one is called reverse line movement, the second one is called a lack of line movement. So our example for reverse line movement, I just picked one of my games that I was looking at. Week 16, Miami Dolphins playing at the Buffalo Bills. The line opens at 3. Miami is favored by 3. And the public largely favors Miami. It was between 70 and 80% of the action was coming in on Miami early in the week. And it started to drop a little bit as the week went on, but it was still much higher than was implied by efficiency. And there's an inverse relationship between the bet percentage and the point spread. So if a sportsbook wants to lower the bet percentage, they need to increase the point spread on the favorite, which makes them a less attractive bet. So whenever Miami is getting more action than they should be, you would expect the sportsbook to increase the line from 3 to 4 and maybe even 5 in order to bring down the bet percentage. Instead, they move the line in the opposite way, which is where you get reverse line movement. And they dropped the line to 2 and eventually to 1 by game time. So they wanted to have a lot of action on Miami, much more than what is implied by efficiency. This is a case where the sportsbook clearly knows something that the average betting public doesn't know, and they're able to take advantage by accepting a great unbalanced action here. And clearly they knew something because Buffalo went on to win the game 19-0. And an example of a lack of line movement, a good example, one of the best, is actually the Super Bowl. So in the Super Bowl, the Denver Broncos, everyone thought they were going to win. They thought their offense was unstoppable. And they opened a 2.5-point favorites, and the public jumped all over it. It was between 70 and 75% of the action the entire 2 weeks leading up to the Super Bowl was coming in on Denver. But what happened is whenever you have a line at 2.5 and much more action is coming in than implied by efficiency, the sportsbook should again increase the point spread to 3, maybe even 4 or 5 in this case because everyone liked Denver. But instead they just kept it at 2.5, which in itself is a strange number because 3 is a much more logical number. So they clearly were doing something, and it was a deliberate deviation from efficiency as implied by their regression model. So Seattle had a lot of value in this game. The 2 weeks leading up to the Super Bowl, I saw this and I was telling a couple people that Seattle had a lot of value, and they ended up, obviously a lot of you know, they went on to win the game by a very large margin, more than I think anyone expected, but Seattle definitely was the better team. And Vegas knew it, but the average betting public thought differently. All right, so let's look at the new sportsbook return based on the updated model. So in the Super Bowl, the sportsbooks accepted 70% of the action on Denver and 30% on Seattle. So if we look at that $220 that we considered earlier, we have 154 on Denver and 66 on Seattle. Seattle bettors are the winners here, and so the sportsbook's going to pay out the $66 wagered on Seattle plus the $60 that were won. So they're collecting $220, paying out $126, and they're making about a 43% return on every dollar that they took in. Now, if Denver had covered, they would have been losing about 33% on every dollar. So it is a high-risk, high-reward situation, but the sportsbook is only going to take that type of risk if they know they have an advantage. And if they have an advantage, we know that there's value in betting against the public. All right, so I went through the entire past season, all 256 games. I wasn't able to get data for previous seasons. It was just impossible to find on the internet. But for the 256 games I could find, I found 72 that fit my criteria of either having a lack of line movement or reverse line movement. And in those 72 games, there was 48 winners, 28 losers, and 42 winners, 28 losers, and 2 ties. So a win rate of 60%, which for anyone in the betting industry is superb. It's not something I would expect long term, but still, it was a very promising start. And I also broke out the games by confidence levels of 3, 4, or 5. 3 being the least confident, 5 being the most confident. And interestingly, confidence level of 3, the least confident games, I was about 50% throughout the year. And so it seems like I need to be a little more strict as to what constitutes a level of 3 versus something that's not really worth betting. So as I said, we got 60% in our sample. I would expect a little less over time. Somewhere between 55 and 60% would be an outstanding achievement, and that's our optimistic goal for this. And the best part is that as long as the sportsbooks are winning, we are winning, because they are essentially tipping us off as to which side has the value. And so as long as the sportsbooks are correctly using their superior knowledge, we are getting good value. The other good thing is that we should become better with more experience. And so every game we look at, we understand the relationship between the point spread and the bet percentage a little bit more. We understand how sportsbooks open lines and how they move them throughout the week in order to get the amount of action they want. And so over time, as we understand that more, you can start to see where they are taking unbalanced action, taking a risk because they know they have an advantage. But the most important point to emphasize is that we do need more data. I wasn't able to get more than just this past season's worth of data, and you need more than 72 games to really look at and say this is going to be a great, viable, long-term strategy. So it's a great start, but I still have a lot of work to do.